During dinner, the silence in the restaurant seemed deafening. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, each beat like a war drum ready to explode. My gaze was fixed on that moment that would change my life forever. Her boss leaned over, smiled, and without hesitation, kissed my wife's cheek. It was quick, but the impact was like a punch. My eyes burned, my breathing became heavy, and I knew it. I knew what that meant. I knew what was hidden behind that closeness, the furtive glances, the complicit smiles that I pretended not to notice. I jumped up, knocking the chair back, and before I even realized what I was saying, the words came out sharp, cutting through the air of the restaurant like blades. I knew everything. You always showed signs of cheating on me. You're going to live on the street, but you don't live in my house anymore. The explosion was instantaneous. People around them turned, whispering, some staring, others looking away, uncomfortable. But I couldn't stop. My hands were shaking, anger boiled like lava inside me, and all I could see was her face. Surprise, shock and guilt. I knew that expression. It was the same expression I had seen before, but which I decided to ignore, thinking maybe it was just my imagination. At that moment, everything made sense. The night she came in late, saying she got stuck at work. The phone calls that ended too quickly when I entered the room. The deleted messages on the cell phone that she never left out of her hands. I wanted to scream, I wanted to break everything around me, but all I could do was stare at her and watch the years of trust go down the drain. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I haven't noticed? That I haven't seen the way he looks at you? That you look at him? She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She was silent, and her silence was all I needed to be sure. The confirmation was there, written on her face. There were no more doubts. The memory of how it all began flashed through my mind like a movie. I was the perfect husband. He worked hard, brought flowers on birthdays, prepared surprises, made plans for the future. I trusted her. I believed in every word, in every smile. But something changed. Maybe it was subtle at first, but now looking back, the signs were all there. The quick kisses before leaving the house, the empty apologies, the coldness disguised as tiredness. And I let it go because I loved it so much. Because I was afraid of finding out that the woman I loved was just a well-told lie. And there, in the middle of that restaurant, in front of everyone, the castle of illusions collapsed. Her boss tried to intervene, standing up and putting his hand on my shoulder as if to calm me down, but I pulled away as if I'd been burned. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. I shouted, making him step back. But his look wasn't one of regret. It was arrogant. He looked at me as if he knew he had already won. And maybe it had. Maybe he would have won the game while I didn't even know I was playing. Her shame was evident, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling. I wanted my every word to be like a knife stuck in her chest. You destroyed everything. Everything. We had a future, we had plans, we had love. And you threw it away. Why did you throw it away? For him. For some boss who treats you like a disposable toy. She finally spoke, her voice shaky and low. It's not like that. I can explain. But there was no explanation. There was no excuse that could erase what I had just seen. The people around them continued to stare, some disguising themselves, others clearly fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. But I didn't care. All I could think about was everything I had done for her. How I was always by her side, even in difficult times. How I sacrificed parts of myself to see you happy. And how she paid me with lies. She tried to get closer, touch my hand, but I backed away. No. Don't touch me. I can't even look at you. My voice came out hoarse, broken. I knew I was broken inside, but I refused to show weakness. Not for her. Not for him. It's over. You leave the house today. The decision was made, and as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't go back. But there was something more. Something I didn't know yet. Something that was hidden behind that kiss, that betrayal. I could feel it. This wasn't just a case. It was something bigger, darker. And the truth was about to come out, changing everything again. Because sometimes the worst thing isn't betrayal. It's finding out how far people are willing to go to hide the truth. Welcome to the channel where the truth about cheating is exposed in a raw and unfiltered way. Here, we do not support no kind of betrayal. Our stories are fictional, but they reflect the harsh reality of how disloyalty can destroy lives, relationships and dreams. Get ready for an intense narrative full of twists and turns. A story that will stir your emotions and keep you hooked from beginning to end. Now, take a deep breath and be ready. What are you about to hear will shock you. Lucas has always been a dedicated man. At the age of 35, he had built a solid career in the civil engineering sector, working on projects that shaped the city and transformed landscapes. He was proud of his work, but more than that, he was proud of the life he built with Emily, his wife of 8 years. Emily was a captivating woman. With a warm smile and a look that seemed to light up any room, she worked as an administrative coordinator at a respected company. Together, they formed a couple admired by friends and family, an example of partnership and complicity. From their first meeting, there was a natural connection between them. Their conversations flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years, and that harmony accompanied them throughout their relationship, from the first months of dating until marriage. The house where they lived reflected the love and effort they invested in each other. A modern townhouse, with large windows that let in natural light and a cozy backyard where they used to spend their Sunday afternoons. Lucas enjoyed taking care of the garden while Emily prepared something special in the kitchen. She had a natural talent for cooking, and he loved surprising her with little improvements around the house. They were the kind of couple who seemed to have everything under control, even in difficult times. When they faced financial challenges in the early years, they joined forces. When the pressure of work was heavy, they found relief in each other's embrace. To outsiders, they were the definition of the perfect marriage. Lucas was always an observant man, someone who valued details. I noticed when Emily changed her perfume or cut her hair, even if they were subtle changes. He made a point of praising her, of reminding her how beautiful he thought she was, how lucky he felt to have her by his side. Emily, in turn, always expressed gratitude. I used to leave sweet notes in his bag or send him messages during work hours saying that I loved him. These small gestures kept the relationship alive and warmed up the routine, making everything lighter. Despite the hectic pace of work, Lucas made a point of being present. Whenever I could, I would leave early to meet her at home or take her to dinner at a new restaurant. He liked to plan surprises, and Emily appreciated every effort. She reciprocated with little details that showed how much she cared, like making his favorite dish after a long day or arranging quick getaways on holidays. They shared dreams, like having children soon and traveling the world. Emily loved talking about the future, about the places she would like to see and the experiences she would like to have with him. Lucas listened intently, visualizing each plan and striving to make these dreams possible. In recent months, however, something has felt different. Lucas began to notice a slight distance from Emily, but decided not to pay much attention. After all, her work was demanding more time, and he understood. I also felt the weight of responsibilities and knew that it was normal to go through moments like this. Emily, in turn, justified her absences with meetings, tight deadlines and corporate events. Lucas supported her, saying that she deserved to grow in her career and achieve her goals. He always encouraged her and was proud of her achievements. Still, there were nights when he felt restless. Sitting on the couch, looking at his cell phone and waiting for a message or call, he wondered if he was demanding too much or if he should be more understanding. Emily arrived late, tired, but with a practiced smile. She kissed him quickly and went up to the shower, leaving him alone in the room. Lucas tried to ignore the discomfort, telling himself that everything would go back to normal once the pressure at work eased. That night, however, something bothered him more than usual. Emily had mentioned a corporate dinner, something formal, with the presence of important clients. She asked Lucas to accompany her, but soon changed her mind, saying that perhaps it would be better for him to stay at home to rest. That sounded strange, but Lucas preferred not to insist. He trusted her. Always trusted. Even so, he spent the day restless, trying to distract himself with work, but with his mind constantly returning to the event. When Emily left the house that night, she looked stunning. She was wearing a red dress that he had never seen before, just the right amount, and was wearing a different perfume. Lucas praised her, but felt a pang in his chest when she looked away. He tried to ignore the discomfort and smiled, telling her to have fun. Emily returned the smile, but there was something about the way she picked up her bag and walked out the door that made Lucas uneasy. Hours later, he decided to show up at the restaurant by surprise. I didn't really know why I was doing that. Maybe to show support, maybe to calm that feeling that something was wrong. As he entered the elegant ballroom, his attention was immediately captured by the sparkle of Emily's red dress. She was sitting at a table in the back, surrounded by colleagues and her boss. Observing from afar, Lucas felt like an intruder, but at the same time he felt he needed to be there. Emily laughed at something her boss said, leaning slightly towards him. Lucas recognized that laugh. It was the same laugh she used to use when she wanted to impress him. His stomach tightened and he fought the urge to go there immediately. He decided to wait, watching. With each minute, the feeling of discomfort grew. Emily seemed too relaxed, too intimate with her boss. He leaned in close to her, lightly touched her arm as he spoke, and she didn't flinch. Lucas felt his blood boil. He tried to convince himself that he was exaggerating, but something inside him screamed that he wasn't. He knew Emily. He knew her every expression, every gesture, and he knew there was something out of place. He decided to wait a little longer, but the moment he saw next made his heart stop. Her boss leaned in even more, said something in Emily's ear, and she smiled, letting him kiss her cheek. It was at that moment that Lucas realized he could no longer ignore what was before his eyes. The chair slid back as he stood up, his face burning with anger and humiliation. Emily looked at him in surprise, and the tension in the air became almost palpable. Lucas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything he had been through in the last few months and knowing that that night would change his life forever. Lucas remained standing in the middle of the restaurant, blood pumping in his temples as his eyes locked on Emily and her boss. Time seemed to have stopped, but at the same time, every second that passed fueled the storm inside him. Emily was still, her face pale and her eyes wide, as if she knew there was no escaping what was about to happen. The boss, on the other hand, maintained a confident posture, adjusting his jacket with a subtle smile, as if he was daring Lucas to react. Lucas's breathing was heavy, and he felt the gaze of everyone present burning into his back, but in that moment, nothing mattered other than the woman he loved and the man who apparently crossed the line. The silence between the three was suffocating, but it was broken when Emily hurriedly stood up, trying to calm the situation. She placed her hands on Lucas's chest, but he recoiled, as if her touch burned him. Her words came quickly, shakily, full of vague justifications that only increased the lump in his throat. She tried to minimize the situation, saying it was just a friendly gesture, that Lucas was interpreting everything wrong. But her eyes told a different story. There was fear in them, not only of what Lucas might do there, but also of what might happen next. Lucas felt torn between the impulse to shout for the entire restaurant to hear and the desire not to turn that moment into something even worse. But it was too late. He couldn't control the words that came out of his mouth. He asked her how she could do that, how she could look at him every day and pretend that everything was fine. Emily tried to argue, but Lucas was no longer listening. His mind was flooded with memories, with moments he trusted blindly, with gestures that now seemed false. The flowers he bought for her, the loving notes, the plans for the future. Everything seemed to have been thrown away with a smile and a stolen kiss. The boss finally spoke up, trying to intervene. His voice was calm, but carried a condescending tone that made Lucas want to advance on him. He said it was all just a misunderstanding, that Lucas was exaggerating. But the words only increased Lucas' anger. He demanded to know how long this had been going on, demanded answers that Emily didn't seem capable of giving. She just shook her head, asking them to get out of there and talk in private. But Lucas didn't want to leave. I didn't want to back down. He wanted to expose the truth, he wanted to rip off the mask that Emily and that man were trying to maintain. Finally, Emily grabbed Lucas' arm and begged them to leave. He let himself be led out, but inside him, everything was falling apart. As soon as they got into the car, silence took over. Emily cried softly, but Lucas couldn't feel sorry. He was too hurt, too betrayed to think about comforting those who hurt him. The road seemed endless, and each kilometer covered added to the weight of what was to come. When they got home, Emily tried once again to explain. She talked about how things between them had changed, about how alone she felt even though she was with him. He said he never planned for that to happen, that it was something that got out of control, but that it didn't mean anything. Lucas laughed bitterly, unable to believe what he was hearing. He asked her if she really thought he would believe that something like that didn't mean anything. Emily begged him to forgive her, to try to make things right, but Lucas was fed up with empty words. He wanted actions, he wanted truths. The discussion intensified. Emily insisted that she still loved him, but Lucas saw it as desperation, as fear of losing the stability he provided. He turned away from her, walked to the bedroom and started to get some things. Emily followed him, begging him not to leave, saying they could get through this. But Lucas was determined. He said he needed space, that he couldn't keep standing there looking at her and pretending that everything could go back to the way it was before. Emily fell to the floor, crying, but Lucas stood firm. As he packed his things, flashes of memory invaded his mind. He remembered all the times she said she was too tired to talk, the excuses to avoid intimate moments, the mysterious messages she quickly deleted. Every detail he ignored now seemed obvious, as if he had been deceived by something that had always been right in front of him. Before leaving, he looked at Emily once more. He saw the woman he loved, but he also saw a stranger, someone he no longer recognized. He said he would come back to get the rest of his things and left, leaving her alone in the room. When he got to the car, he took a deep breath and tried to hold back the tears. He didn't want to cry, he didn't want to feel weak. But the pain was too great to ignore. As he drove aimlessly, thoughts swirled in his head. He needed to understand how everything got to that point, he needed to find answers to the questions that tormented him. But deep down, he knew the worst part was yet to come. Because something inside him said that kiss wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a revelation that would change everything forever. Lucas stared at the empty room while the echo of Emily's words still reverberated in his mind. Her desperate plea for him not to leave her alone seemed distant now, as if it had been said by a stranger. His chest felt tight, his breathing was heavy, and the silence that filled the room only increased the weight of that betrayal. But there was something that couldn't get out of his head. Her boss. His posture, his confident look, his slight smile when everything was exposed in the restaurant. It wasn't just a case. Lucas felt there was something more, something that was beyond a simple slip, and the need to discover the truth consumed him. Emily's last words before he left the house echoed like a ghost. She begged him not to make hasty decisions, to hear her side before ending everything. But how do you listen to someone who has broken your most sacred trust? Still, something about the way she looked at him, as if she wanted to say something she couldn't put into words, made him stop before he walked away. Now, standing in front of the open suitcase on the bed, he felt doubt eating away at his resolve. I needed to understand, I needed the answers she was clearly hiding. Returning to the living room, he found Emily sitting on the floor, her eyes red and her face wet with tears. When she saw him, she stood up quickly, as if afraid he might disappear again. Lucas crossed his arms, trying to maintain a firm posture, but his voice came out heavier than he intended. "I wanted her to tell the truth," bluntly. Emily hesitated, looking at him as if searching for the right words, but all she managed was a choked sob before she began to speak. She said that her boss had approached her months ago, offering opportunities at work, praising her performance and creating an environment where she felt valued. He said that initially it was just a professional relationship, but that little by little he began to cross boundaries, offering dinners and gifts under the pretext of friendship. Emily said she tried to resist, but felt vulnerable. Lucas heard everything, but every word seemed more like an excuse than an explanation. So he asked what he really wanted to know. "Why didn't she tell? Why did you let it go so far?" Emily swallowed, hesitating again. It was at that moment that Lucas saw her hesitation turn into panic. Something bigger was about to be said, something that would explain why she was so desperate to hold him there. With tears streaming down her face, Emily revealed that her boss knew something that could destroy not only their marriage, but also Lucas' career and reputation. He had proof of a mistake Lucas had made in the past, something that could be used to destroy everything he had built. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He asked what it was, but Emily hesitated, begging him not to lose control. Finally, between sobs, she revealed that her boss knew about an irregular transaction Lucas had made years ago to save a project he was working on. Something that involved altered documents and a forged signature. She said she discovered this by accident and, instead of confronting him, she tried to protect her husband by keeping her boss close, thinking she could control the situation. But he used it against her. The shock ran through Lucas like an electric current. He tried to deny it, but Emily's expression showed that she knew the truth. The boss had threatened to expose everything, and Emily, afraid of losing everything, gave in. He said he thought he could stop him from going too far, but things got out of hand. Lucas felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Everything he had worked for, all the effort to build a stable and respectable life, was now hanging by a thread. Anger mixed with frustration. He didn't know if he hated Emily more for hiding it or himself for putting them both in this position. He felt betrayed in every possible way. Emily tried to get closer, saying that she did everything out of love, that she tried to protect him, but Lucas moved away. She said that love didn't justify betrayal, that she had chosen the wrong way to deal with it. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just about her. As Emily cried, Lucas felt his own world fall apart. He thought about the years of hard work, the sleepless nights, the sacrifice to get where he was. And now everything was threatened by a past mistake. Even worse, for trusting the wrong person. Emily tried to explain that there was still time to fix things, that they could face this together, but Lucas couldn't see a way. He felt that her every word was filled with despair, but also with guilt. Amidst the chaos, Lucas remembered the look in his boss's eyes, the arrogant posture, the smile that seemed to predict his every move. He felt his blood boil again. Now he knew that this wasn't just a case of emotional betrayal. It was a manipulation, a dirty game that trapped them. And he wasn't willing to lose. He looked at Emily one last time before leaving, saying he needed some time to think. She tried to stop him, but his mind was already made up. Lucas got in the car and drove aimlessly, trying to organize his thoughts. She knew she needed to act quickly, but she also knew she couldn't trust anyone, not even her. He was alone in that battle, and the weight of it made him feel suffocated. The boss's face never left his mind. I needed to face him, I needed to turn the tide. But before that, he needed to decide if Emily was still part of that plan or if she was as lost as he was. The car's engine roared as Lucas accelerated, determined to find out how far this game would go and what he would need to do to get out of it without losing everything he had built. Anger was mixed with fear, but above all there was a growing need for justice. He knew that the night was still far from over, and the truth he was about to discover could be even worse than he imagined. Lucas parked the car on a dimly lit street, the engine still growling low as his thoughts echoed louder than any surrounding noise. He rested his hands on the steering wheel, feeling cold sweat running down his forehead. Emily's confession was etched in her mind, but now, away from her, the words felt even heavier. He looked into the darkness outside, but all he saw was her boss's face, that smug look, that expression of absolute control. Lucas knew he couldn't leave it like that. He needed to face that man, he needed to regain control of his own life. He picked up the phone and, for a moment, thought about calling Emily. He wanted to demand more answers, he wanted to scream at her for putting him in that position. But I knew none of that would solve it. He put the device back in his pocket and got out of the car, walking down the sidewalk while his mind worked quickly. I needed proof, I needed to understand how far this manipulation had gone. He got back in the car and drove towards the office where Emily worked. I knew it was late, but that man usually stayed after work. He himself had heard Emily mention this on several occasions. When she arrived at the building, she saw that some lights were still on the floor where her boss had his office. Adrenaline shot through his body. He got out of the car and entered the building without worrying about being discreet. The security guard at reception looked at him, but Lucas remained firm, saying he needed to get something from his wife's office. The man hesitated, but allowed him to climb. In the elevator, the weight of that decision seemed to tighten his chest. There was no turning back. When she reached her floor, she walked down the empty hallway to the door of Emily's boss's office. It was ajar, and Lucas heard voices inside. She recognized his voice immediately. The tone was calm, controlled, as always, but now Lucas realized the venom hidden in every word. He pushed the door without knocking, entering abruptly. The boss looked up, surprised for a moment, but soon recovered his posture, crossing his arms and leaning slightly against the table. Lucas wasted no time. He got straight to the point, demanding to know what his plan was, what he really wanted. The boss smiled, a calculated, almost rehearsed smile, and walked away from the table, walking slowly around the room as he spoke. He said that Lucas was acting on impulse and that he should be more careful before making accusations. Lucas approached, interrupting him, saying he knew about the threats, about the use of information to blackmail Emily. But the boss kept control, asking what Lucas was willing to sacrifice to protect his name. The provocation was too much. Lucas grabbed the man by the collar, pushing him against the wall. The boss didn't react, he just smiled again, as if he had already expected that reaction. He said he had everything documented, that one wrong move and Lucas's life would be destroyed. Emily knew this, and that's why she gave in. She had no choice, and now Lucas didn't either. Lucas felt his hands shake, but he let go of his boss, taking a step back. I needed to think. I couldn't lose control. The boss continued speaking, taking advantage of the moment to throw more words like blades. He said that Emily was easy to manipulate, that it was enough to plant doubts about their marriage to make her get closer. He said he knew how to exploit her insecurities, how to make her trust him. Lucas felt his blood boil, but he also felt the weight of what that meant. Emily wasn't just tricked. She was used, manipulated in a way that made her believe she was protecting her husband when in fact she was just empowering the enemy. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. He said he wouldn't leave it like that he would do whatever was necessary to put an end to that dirty game. The boss laughed, saying that Lucas had no way out. But Lucas knew he needed to find one. He left the office without looking back, leaving his boss alone, still with that arrogant smile on his face. He drove home feeling torn between hatred and determination. When he arrived, he found Emily on the couch, her eyes swollen from crying. She stood up as soon as he entered, but he raised his hand, asking her to wait. I needed to think, I needed to organize everything before making any decision. Emily started talking, saying that she was willing to do anything to make amends, to help him get out of that situation. Lucas looked at her, trying to see the woman he had fallen in love with, but all he saw was the reflection of betrayal. Still, part of him knew he needed her. He needed to understand everything she knew, every detail of what had happened. He sat on the sofa and asked her to tell him everything, without hiding anything. Emily hesitated, but began to speak. He told about the conversations, about the meetings that began as business lunches and ended in increasingly personal dinners. She told her about the threats, about her fear of losing everything, about how she felt trapped. She said she tried to resist, but each time her boss pushed her, she felt weaker. Lucas listened, but the pain grew with each word. He asked her if she really believed this was in the best interest of protecting him, if she thought he would never find out. Emily said she was afraid to tell him, afraid he would hate her. Lucas replied that he was already destroyed, that he no longer knew who to trust. She cried, begging for a chance to fix everything, but Lucas got up, walking to the window. He said it wasn't something that could be fixed easily. Emily walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder. He said he loved him, that everything he did was out of desperation, but Lucas walked away. He said he needed time, but he knew time wouldn't erase what happened. I needed to decide my next step, but the weight of that decision was overwhelming. That night, Lucas barely slept. The boss's face was still in his mind, as were Emily's words. I knew I needed to fight, but I also knew the battle would be difficult. When the sun rose, his mind was already made up. It wouldn't end there. He would find a way to turn the tide, no matter what. Lucas opened his eyes before the alarm clock even went off. The dim light coming through the crack in the curtain seemed as heavy as the thoughts that had kept him awake all night. The emptiness next to him on the bed seemed to scream the absence of something he no longer knew he could recover. He stood up slowly, as if any sudden movement could make him collapse for good. He walked to the bathroom, turned on the tap and looked at his reflection in the mirror. Her sunken, red eyes revealed her tiredness, but what bothered him most was the hard, cold expression that now took over her face. He tried to remember when was the last time he truly felt happy, but the memories were all tainted by what he discovered. She dressed mechanically, grabbed her car keys and left the house without saying goodbye to Emily, who had remained locked in her room since the night before. She tried to talk to him a few times, but Lucas ignored her. He didn't know if he was more hurt by the betrayal itself or by the fact that she had justified everything as an attempt to protect him. That thought consumed him. Part of him wanted to believe, wanted to find a justification to forgive her, but the other part, the most hurt, screamed that that wasn't enough. The trust was broken, and Lucas didn't know if he would ever be able to rebuild it. He drove through streets that seemed emptier than usual. The phone rang non-stop, but he ignored each call. He knew Emily was trying to reach him, but he also knew he wasn't ready to hear any more excuses. He parked at a cafe where he used to go in the days when everything still seemed perfect. He sat at a table in the corner and watched the movement. Couples laughed, friends talked, and the world seemed to go on normally while his had stopped. He picked up the phone and, after taking a deep breath, decided to call an old friend who worked as a lawyer. He needed guidance, he needed to understand his options. When his friend answered, Lucas summarized the situation, trying to keep his voice steady, but he felt the weight of each word. The friend listened in silence and said he would meet him in an hour. Lucas hung up and felt a brief relief, but he knew that conversation wouldn't solve the real problem. As she waited, the image of Emily's boss kept popping into her mind. That arrogance, that control. Lucas felt he couldn't let that go unpunished. He needed to find a way to turn the game around, but he also knew that any rash move could cost him dearly. When the lawyer arrived, they sat down and Lucas explained everything in detail, omitting only the most compromising parts about the mistake he made in the past. His friend listened attentively, but the expression on his face already said what Lucas feared. The situation was complicated, and any action would need to be well calculated. The lawyer suggested that Lucas gather evidence. He said the blackmail was illegal and that, with the right evidence, they could pressure Emily's boss to back down. But Lucas knew this wouldn't be easy. He got up, thanked him for the help, and left the cafe feeling even more overwhelmed. I needed to act, but I also needed to make sure I didn't make another mistake. He returned home, and when he opened the door he found Emily in the living room, sitting on the sofa looking lost. She stood up as soon as she saw him enter, but Lucas raised his hand to stop her from speaking. He said he still didn't trust her, but he needed answers. He asked if there was anything else she was hiding. Emily hesitated, but shook her head. She said that she had already told him everything, that she was willing to do anything to help him get out of that situation. Lucas heard the desperation in her voice and, for a moment, he felt a flash of empathy. But he quickly dismissed that thought. She said they needed to act quickly, that they couldn't let her boss continue to be in control. Emily agreed and said that her boss kept important documents in his office, including copies of everything he used to make the threats. Lucas knew it would be risky, but he also knew that this was the only chance to turn the game around. They spent hours planning every detail. Emily was willing to collaborate, but Lucas still maintained an emotional barrier. He knew he needed her at that moment, but he couldn't erase the images of her with another man from his mind. The plan was simple. Emily would distract her boss while Lucas broke into the office to get the documents. He knew it could go wrong, but he also knew he couldn't continue living under that threat. The next night, everything was ready. Emily left for work early, with the excuse of needing to resolve some issues. Lucas stayed in the car, watching from afar as she entered the building. His heart was racing, but he tried to stay focused. When he saw Emily and her boss leave the office, he took a deep breath and entered the building. He passed security without difficulty and went up to the office floor. The door was locked, but Emily had left a copy of the key with him. Lucas entered and started searching through the drawers, feeling the sweat running down his back. He found folders with documents, photos and even recordings. Everything organized meticulously, as if her boss expected to use it at any moment. He grabbed as much material as he could carry and hurried out, feeling his heart beating faster. When he got back to the car, he felt relief mixed with adrenaline. He picked up the phone and called Emily, saying he had made it. She responded in a low voice, saying that she needed to keep her boss distracted for a while longer. Lucas hung up and began looking through the documents. What he found made his stomach turn. There was evidence not only against him, but against other people as well. It appeared that Emily's boss had a history of manipulation and blackmail, using confidential information to control anyone who crossed his path. Lucas knew he now had the advantage, but he also knew he needed to be careful. She looked at Emily's photos and felt her chest tighten. Part of him wanted to believe that she only did it to protect him, but another part of him couldn't forget the betrayal. I needed to decide what I would do with all that, but I knew that the final confrontation was near. Her boss wouldn't give up easily, and Lucas was prepared to face him. Fear and anger mixed together, but now there was something more. Determination. He kept the documents in a safe place and waited for Emily. When she got home, she seemed nervous but relieved to see he was okay. Lucas showed what he found and said that it would change everything. Emily nodded, but he noticed that the fear was still present in her eyes. She knew that the battle wasn't over yet and that her boss wouldn't accept losing so easily. As he watched Emily sitting on the couch, Lucas felt the weight of the dilemma he faced. Would he protect the woman who betrayed him or would he let her face the consequences of her actions? Lucas looked at Emily sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on the papers spread out on the table. The silence in the room felt as heavy as the thick air surrounding them. She was clasping her hands in her lap nervously, but he couldn't feel sorry anymore. Not after everything she's been through, not after finding out how far she went to hide the truth and how she allowed it to happen for so long. Still, as much as he tried to remain cool, there was a part of him that fought the urge to protect her, to get her away from that hell. But he knew he could no longer trust her. Every look, every word, seemed loaded with ulterior motives. He took the documents and recordings and said it would end that night. Emily tried to argue, asking him to be careful, saying that her boss was dangerous and wouldn't let it go, but Lucas had already made up his mind. She insisted on going with him, but he refused, stating that he could no longer trust her presence in that type of situation. Emily started crying again, saying she would do anything to make things right, but Lucas turned his back and left, leaving her alone with her tears. He drove to the office building feeling his heart pounding in his chest, but the determination to end it was greater than his fear. When she arrived, she waited until she saw the lights go out and watched Emily's boss leave the building, walking to the parking lot. Lucas got out of the car and quickly approached, calling his name. The man turned around with a smile as if he had already expected that meeting. He asked if Lucas had gotten tired of playing detective and finally decided to talk like an adult, but Lucas threw the document folder on the floor, causing the papers to scatter. The boss's smile disappeared instantly. He bent down to see the contents, trying to maintain his composure, but Lucas noticed the exact moment the man realized how trapped he was. He tried to say that all of this could be explained, that Lucas didn't understand the context, but Lucas just crossed his arms and said that he had already spent too long listening to lies. He made it clear that he had enough evidence to destroy him, both in his career and in his personal life, and that if he didn't disappear, he wouldn't hesitate to use every bit of information he had. The boss tried to negotiate, saying he could resolve things with money or favors, but Lucas wouldn't budge. He said the only thing he wanted was to see him gone, completely ruined. The man tried to maintain his posture, but the mask began to fall. For the first time, Lucas saw fear in his eyes. The threat was now on the other side. Lucas walked away, saying he would give him until the next day to resign his position and disappear. Otherwise, the recordings would be handed over to the police and the press. When he returned home, he found Emily awake, pacing back and forth. She ran to him, asking how it was, but he just replied that he was done. Emily tried to get closer, saying she was proud of him, that together they could start over, but Lucas backed away. He said there was no longer one together. She was silent, processing his words, but soon began begging him to reconsider. He said he still loved him, that he had made mistakes, but that everything he did was to protect him. Lucas shook his head and said that her love had been selfish, that betrayal was not justifiable, no matter the reason. He said that maybe one day he would be able to forgive her, but that day would not be now. Emily fell to the floor, crying, but he could no longer feel anything but tired. He picked up the bags that were already packed and walked out the door, leaving her alone in the house that had previously seemed like the perfect home. In the days that followed, the news began to spread. Emily's boss resigned and disappeared, but information about the blackmail and manipulations began to leak. Lucas learned that he was being investigated and that his reputation was completely destroyed. He felt a brief satisfaction, but soon realized that it did not erase the scars that had been left. Emily tried to get in touch several times, but Lucas ignored her. He was determined to move on, even if the pain still haunted him in every memory. He returned to work and, little by little, began to rebuild his life. He met new people, resumed old hobbies and began to see a different future than the one he had planned. It was at a corporate event that he met Sophia, a woman with a sincere smile and a welcoming look. The conversation between them flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for years. For the first time in a long time, Lucas felt something he thought he had lost forever. But this time, he decided to take it easy, without rushing, without unrealistic expectations. He wanted to make sure he was ready before opening his heart again. Meanwhile, Emily faced the consequences of her choices. He lost his job and saw his reputation tarnished by his connections with his boss. She tried to get back on her feet, but the marks of betrayal and lies continued to follow her. She knew she had lost Lucas forever, but she also knew that this was a pain she would have to bear alone. Lucas moved on, but with scars that would forever remind him of what had happened. He learned to be more cautious, more attentive to signs he previously ignored. And although there were still nights when the memories came back to haunt him, he knew he had made the right decision. I was determined to build something new, something true, this time with solid foundations. Now that the story has come to an end, I want to know what you thought of this outcome. Leave your comment and share your opinion. And if you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content. Please remember that this channel does not support cheating of any kind. Betrayal destroys lives and relationships, and stories like this are a warning so that wrong choices are not repeated. Thank you for following along this far and see you in the next story.